Hi, second grade. I hope you had a great weekend. Today I am going to be reading the article Spring. This is for Monday, April 20th, 2020, day 14 of your work packet. Now, before we get started, at the end of the article, there are some questions that they ask us to underline the answers for as we read. So I want to start by looking at those so we can find them as we read. In red, when does spring begin in the Northern Hemisphere? In blue, what do bears do in the springtime? In green, what happens to plants in the spring? In yellow, what is weather like during the spring? In purple, what are some activities that people do during the spring? Let's go back up to the top, and as we read, we'll look for some of those answers. Spring. Over the course of the year, we have 4 seasons. Spring begins on March 20th in the Northern Hemisphere. That was the first question. So I'm going to get my red and I'm going to underline that. Spring begins on March 20th in the Northern Hemisphere. That's where we live. Now, before we keep reading, let's go back down to see our next question we're looking for. What do bears do in the springtime? Okay, let's keep reading and let's remember that. During spring, the weather gets warmer and we see changes in plants and animals. Plants blossom and turn green. Animals become more active. The weather becomes warmer during the spring as the northern hemisphere is tilted more towards the sun. The hours of daylight are also longer in the spring. While the northern hemisphere is having spring, the southern hemisphere is having fall. The northern hemisphere is starting to tilt towards the sun and has spring weather. The southern hemisphere is starting to tilt away from the sun and has fall weather. The same happens as the northern hemisphere moves into summer. The southern hemisphere is the opposite, moving into winter. During the spring, there are many changes in animal life. Oh, now we're talking about animals, so I'm going to listen to see if they answer the question about bears. Some animals, like bears, are coming out of hibernation. Oh, there's our answer. So in the spring, let me get my blue. Bears are coming out of hibernation. I'm going to underline that in blue. Others, like birds and monarch butterflies, are migrating back north for the summer. You might start to see more insects and also hear frogs chirping. Many baby animals are born during the spring. Let's go see what the third question we're looking for is. In green, what happens to plants in the spring? Okay, as we keep reading, let's pay attention to what happens to plants. Plants also go through changes in the spring. Here we go. I'm going to get my green underliner because we're going to start talking about it. Flowers and trees are dormant all winter. That means that it's like they're asleep. Spring brings more light and warmer weather. This causes plants to blossom. So plants start blossoming, growing, and trees get back their leaves. Spring is also a good time to plant flowers. Just make sure not to plant them too early. Sometimes a spring frost can damage plants. Now, before we keep reading, let's go look at what our next question is going to be. Okay, our next question says, in yellow, what is weather like during the spring? Let's keep reading and look for that. Spring weather can sometimes be unpredictable. Here we go, we're talking about weather, so I'm going to get my yellow ready. As the old saying goes, April showers bring May flowers. While this is not always true, spring can be a rainy time. So there's a type of weather that happens in the spring, rainy. Always pack an umbrella before leaving the house just in case it rains. Sometimes spring can bring really warm days. So warm days, that's another type of weather that can happen in the spring. And sometimes the days will feel more like winter. In fact, in some places, it can even snow during the spring. It is always important to check the weather before going outside. Before we keep reading, let's look at our last question. In purple, what are some activities that people do during the spring season? So let's make sure to pay attention to this. I'm going to get my purple ready. Spring is a time to get outside. It is a chance to do outdoor activities that were too cold to do during the winter. These activities could include going on walks. Ooh, there's an activity. Hiking, kayaking, visiting the zoo, and more. Another fun springtime activity is to watch a sporting event, such as a baseball game. There are also a lot of holidays to celebrate in the spring. From Easter to Memorial Day, there are many holidays all season long. Now that we are done reading the article, we can answer the questions. Remember to always go back and look for evidence in the text when writing your answer. Also remember to write your answers in full sentences. Make sure you start with a capital letter and end with punctuation. Also make sure you are doing your best to spell trick words the right way and to use different spelling tools that we've learned in Foundations to help you spell words that you might not know. Question number 1 says, what is paragraph 3 mostly about? So I'm going to go back and look in paragraph 3 because I know it's so important to find evidence in the text. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 is about plants. So you should reread this paragraph and then write a full sentence saying what this paragraph is about. Question 2, why should you always have an umbrella in the springtime? Oh, I remember they talked about having an umbrella in the paragraph about weather. So I'm going to go back and find that paragraph about weather. Here it is. I'm going to read back through this paragraph to see why we always need an umbrella. Make sure you write your answer in a full sentence. Question 3. Why is it fall for the southern hemisphere when it's springtime for us? I remember that the article talked about this, so I'm going to go look for evidence to answer this question. I see that this first paragraph talks about the weather in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So I'm going to reread this paragraph to find evidence to answer that question. Question 4, what do you like about the spring? This is an opinion question, so you don't need to find any evidence in the article to answer this question. This is just your opinion. What is your favorite thing about the spring? Do you like that flowers start blooming? Do you like the rainy weather? Do you like that it starts getting warm? Take a minute to think about what you like about the spring and make sure you write your answer in a full second grade sentence. When you are done, send a picture of your work to your teacher. Great job, students!